All right, well, I've already given you some sleepers to draft for fantasy baseball. Got to do some busts as well, right? Just keep in mind before I get to the list, I don't hate the players, I just hate the ADP. Bust for draft season doesn't mean that they're just going to have a horrible year. It doesn't mean I have no interest in them whatsoever. It doesn't even mean I won't draft these guys somewhere at some point. But where they're going right now, and again, it's still very early, but based on what I'm seeing, I just think it's way too early. Or, you know what, there are actually a couple of players here I am just going to avoid. And today I'm going to focus on hitters. All right. So I already know the first couple of names here. You know, some people are just going to get ticked off because somebody expects them to break out. Somebody's going to say, how can you call this guy a bust? Well, here we go. There's always plenty of busts that you don't expect. The first one on the list is a guy who's really just kind of a no-brainer first couple of rounds pick. How could you not like Michael Harris II of the Atlanta Braves? I mean, he seems like a pretty safe early round pick, right? Get your power, get your speed, get you average on a good team. So what's not to like? I'm going to tell you, but first, let's just acknowledge the good. Why is he being taken so high? Atlanta Braves, yeah, they weren't really a record-setting offense last year, not nearly as good as the year before, which you could have expected even before Ronald Acuna get hurt. Let's just acknowledge that most players that were drafted from the Braves last year in fantasy baseball, other than Marcell Ozuna, basically were draft busts. Austin Riley had a terrible first half until picking up late. Even then, kind of underachieved. Matt Olson basically looked like Oakland A's version of Matt Olson. Ozzy Albies, another down year, which means this year is probably a good year. But also, Michael Harris, I mean, he really didn't pay off based on where he was drafted last year. Because again, kind of a consensus top 50 pick. People thought the same thing. Young, upcoming player, great offense, power speed, all that stuff. Okay, so here's the good thing. He does hit for average, and in fact, last year hit for 284 expected batting average, which is a little better of an indicator. So he underachieved on his actual batting average, which again, 264 is just okay, but he really should have done better. And he's hit for a very high expected batting average now 2 years in a row. So average, okay, check. Now, as far as power, again, it's good, not great, not a slugger. He hasn't reached the 20 homer mark yet, but that's also because he hasn't played really a full season yet. 19, 18, 16 home runs. You know, if he manages to stay healthy, well, maybe he does get to 20, even 25 home runs. But now let's acknowledge the bad. This is part of the problem. He hasn't played a full season. We haven't seen him do it yet because the last couple of years, he's gotten banged up. And honestly, I think even in a full season, I think 20 home runs is his absolute ceiling. He's not a slugger, but he's also just not a fly ball hitter. His fly ball rate has been under 20% his entire major league career. This is a guy who will yank one once in a while, but really, you cannot expect a power surge at any point, really. Okay, maybe a couple years from now, he has a Christian Yelich type of revolution where he all of a sudden starts lifting it. Maybe. I don't think it's happening this year. Now, as far as the speed, okay, he's got a couple 20 steal seasons, but look at last year. Only 10 steals, but also he was caught stealing 6 times. So this isn't just a matter of not running as much because of the injuries or recovery from injuries. He's just not running very effectively. He's fast, but he's not elite in terms of sprint speed. It's 75th percentile, and he's really not the most effective base runner. So if you take a quick glance at the stat sheet and you think, hey, this guy stays healthy, 2020, good average, good team, all that, in the bag. I don't think so. I think, again, 2020 is the ceiling, and you're drafting him in the first 3 rounds. At least that's where he's being taken right now. On average, pick 33 in NFBC leagues. And I just can't do it. I need a higher ceiling than that. And of course, the fact that he just could get banged up again because he's done it now a couple years in a row. Honestly, if I'm looking for this type of profile, I'm waiting another round, maybe even 2, and I'll just take White Langford instead. All right, next. Again, very similar type of player. I know I'm going to get some comments for this. James Wood. This is the type of profile that fantasy players, baseball fans, everybody just absolutely loves. A guy who has massive power, at least power potential, right? That raw power is actually 80 grade. I don't think there's anybody who could crush the ball any harder than James Wood can. And he's got speed, and he showed it. So this is kind of like your do-it-all. #1 prospect for the organization is going to get a full-time job to begin opening day. Why isn't the ceiling like that of a top 10 pick? And a lot of people will point to Ellie De La Cruz from last year. Yeah, he was kind of risky, but look what happened. Even though he didn't hit for an elite average and still struck out a lot, he still returned great value on his investment. But I'd rather point you to O'Neal Cruz, who is probably somebody who profiles more similarly to Wood. Bigger frame, guy who's more power first, and then with the speed as well. And O'Neill Cruz, sure, you can say, well, he's been injured here and there. We haven't seen what he can do yet, but maybe we kind of have. I mean, look, 50-50, 40-40, whatever, it just might not be in the cards for these guys. And maybe we'll down the road, but let's acknowledge the fact that James Wood is now entering his first full season. It's going to take some time to figure things out. Last year, he did flash the speed, stole 14 bases. I think he steals you 20 plus, maybe 25 or even 30. Okay, fine. I'll admit he can do that. The power, obviously he's got it, but he hasn't tapped into it yet. He really didn't have a monster power output even in the minor leagues before getting the call. It takes time to really be able to power up consistently against major league pitching, and a 30% strikeout rate, or pretty close to it, 29.7% last year. It's going to take some time for that to calm down a little bit. This guy has a big frame, a big, powerful swing, so he's going to leave himself vulnerable, to some of those off-speed pitches, breaking balls. It's going to take time. Again, just like O'Neill Cruz and some of those hitters. I love James Wood as a prospect. I'd love to have him on my fantasy team. I don't love having to take him in the top 50 picks right here, right now this year. It's just going to take a little bit longer before he really reaches whatever his ceiling is. I wouldn't say he's being drafted at his absolute ceiling, but it's pretty close to it, and there's just a lot of risk here. And that leads me to another power hitter that people are just ready to kind of set in the lineup and say, yeah, Mark Vientos. He's the next Pete Alonso. He's taking his place in New York. He's going to hit 30 plus home runs. Why wouldn't he? Well, he might not hit 30 home runs. Now, he came close last year, very close. Went deep 27 times and only 454 plate appearances. His first extended opportunity to have a starting job there. He's got a starting job this year for sure. It'll probably be at first base. Again, I'm assuming the Polar Bear doesn't come back because it doesn't sound like it's happening there for the Mets. And look, Vientos, very impressive here. We knew he had that slugger profile because this is a bigger guy. And, sure, he'll strike out some, but you take that trade off when the power happens. And he definitely found a way to power up last year, a barrel rate in the 92nd percentile. Now, in this case, I don't really care too much if Vientos does strike out a fair bit, as long as he's getting me home runs and RBIs and hitting for a decent average. I just care if it's a decent average. But that's where I worry, because this is a guy who we've only seen one time through in part of a major league season. And what I noticed is that towards the season's end, although his power was still pretty good, he did predictably struggle against breaking balls, only hit 169 against them, and his chase rate did climb a little bit. Now, pitchers are going to try to figure out how to approach this guy. You don't want to get the ball on the outside part of the zone. He's vulnerable down and in, which makes sense for a guy with his frame, wants to extend his arms. Don't leave it on the outer edge of the plate for this guy. Try to pitch him inside. Pitchers are going to figure that out. They're going to realize, okay, this guy is now legit. And so I just worry about that adjustment period. I think Vientos could do it, but this is just, again, a very risky power first profile, and you don't have some speed or a high batting average to fall back on if he slumps. Now, one guy I think I'm just really not drafting at all, he'd have to fall pretty far, is Willy Adames. This is a player that you think at the shortstop position could get you a little bit of everything. Had his best season, really for fantasy purposes, of his career last year with Milwaukee. But here's problem number one. He's not with Milwaukee anymore. He's a Giant now. And this is a big deal. You might already know, but Oracle Park in San Francisco, not a hitter-friendly venue. It was 25th overall in run factor last year. And for home runs, for right-handed hitters, which Adames is, 28th in home run park factor, as opposed to Miller Park from Milwaukee, which was 6th. And just the change in offense altogether, Milwaukee was 6th in runs scored last year as an offense. The Giants were 17th. And talk about those steals. Okay, so the power maybe goes down a little bit, sure. Well, the steals were really boosted him and has boosted his ADP this year. All of a sudden, he became a guy who was a power and speed threat. Really wasn't that before. 21 stolen bases last year. That's nice. Again, we have visions of the 2020 club repeating itself. I don't think that's happening at all, because this is probably the biggest difference, not just the power. Milwaukee was number 2 in terms of stolen base attempts per game last year under Pat Murphy. On the other hand, the Giants were the 4th lowest. They do not run, and I really don't see that changing this year. And so while a new skipper in Milwaukee gave the green light a lot to Adames more than ever before, it's going to be reversed here. This is going to be a total outlier on his resume. I see Adames being lucky to even get single digits in steals. The power is going to go down. He's not a guy who's going to hit 300 or even come close to it. Yeah, I just worry that he's going to be kind of replacement level offensively. And a guy that might be even worse than replacement level, who was barely that last year, is Gleyber Torres. Gleyber, it was kind of a running joke last year between me and Chris when we do the live shows and the waiver wire shows on the streams here is when's the next Gleyber Torres question going to come up? Because every week somebody was worried about this guy. Are you panicked? Are you worried? Do we even keep him? And eventually the answer just became don't ask, don't bother. When's it going to change for him? It didn't really. I mean, sure, he had a better second half, but was it good enough that you were happy keeping him in your starting lineup? Not really. And so what's changing this year? Worse offense, worse ballpark. No, thank you. Torres is a Tiger now, and so sure, he'll hold down an everyday job for sure, but it's not going to be with the Yankees. It's going to be the Tigers. Okay, the Tigers made the playoffs. Good for them. They're better than they used to be. This is not anything close to the Yankees. Don't kid yourself. And ballpark, definitely worse for power, but I don't even know if that makes a big difference because Torres' power is sort of drying up a little bit as well. Last year had his lowest exit velocity, average exit velocity. It took a big dip, the lowest since 2021. He had that little spike the previous couple years, and now it's gone back. And so while this is a player that is still technically, in terms of prime age, a guy who could have his best power output, it's going away. And this is a career 265 hitter, not someone who's really helping you with average. What about speed? Nope. 4 steals last year. Speed has never been his thing, but you're not getting that. You're getting middling average. You're probably going to get just mediocre power output this year. Second base isn't even that deep this year, but there are several players I think he'll be able to be replaced with on the waiver wire this year. I just don't think it's worth drafting him, even no matter where he falls. And then I did save this for last. I just have to say it. I actually kind of said this last year. Didn't regret it. Turned out to be the right call. I'm not touching Mike Trout. The writing has been on the wall for a couple of years. It hasn't changed. The last time Trout even got to 500 plate appearances in a season was 2019. And over the last 4 seasons, ever since the shortened 2020 year, an average of 283 plate appearances per year. That's not even half a season's worth. And we've just seen things are not getting better. They're getting worse. There's one issue after other. It's not just the back. This chronic back issue is not going away, by the way. It's just something he has. And then the knee, there is always something. And he's not getting any younger. And even before last year and the year before, we had already seen the speed go away. He wasn't going to be a 5 category stud for you. We haven't seen double-digit steals since 2019, much less 20. And the most concerning thing is you're not even getting elite batting average anymore. His expected batting average has just plummeted over the last couple of years. Obviously, his health is a big part of it, but that's the point. It's not getting better. I'm not taking a chance. I don't care where he's being drafted. Guys, you cannot look back to the past. And sure, Trout could have really been the best player by far of his generation. Some people will say he already was. I mean, that's debatable. We'll never know really how great he could have been, but man, I'm not drafting based on the past, which is why I didn't draft Clayton Kershaw any of the past 3 years. Didn't regret that. I'm not going to regret just ignoring Trout completely this year. Now, you definitely won't regret drafting any of these guys. These are some of my favorite sleepers to target as far as hitters go on draft day.